Hey there, welcome to the DFS Build NFL DFS edition. This is Conference Championship Week. I'm Kevin Roberts, getting ready to break down this two-game slate as the AFC and NFC title games getting underway, trying to finalize the Super Bowl 59 matchup. All you really care about, though, is what you need to do to get a winning lineup, and that is what I'm trying to help you out with. Been handing out some pretty good picks lately. I was on Jaden Daniels the past 2 weeks in the playoffs. He did pretty well. I was on that Terry McLaurin stack as well. In both rounds, you're going to have misses if you try to go underweight on guys. I did say I wanted to go a little bit underweight on Jahmyr Gibbs with David Montgomery back. That was a gaffe. I still said I wanted to get to him because he's only 7.7K. So hopefully you had a lot of Jahmyr Gibbs in your lineups and you ended up having a good week last week. It's onward and upward as we go heading into this conference championship week. Got to consider the fact that all these defenses are pretty capable at this point. These teams are playing at, an elevated awareness. So matchups that are juicy sometimes aren't so juicy. There's going to be more broken plays and more chaos than we're used to. So it's a little bit tough to predict, but I'm going to do the best I can. If you like free content, if I help you in any way, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We get a lot of repeat visitors who do not subscribe. So ask yourself, why are you not subscribing? Does it do any damage to you? I don't think it does. And it helps us out a ton. So please do that. And if you just like extra free advice and want more help, like updated core plays or specific lineup advice or DMs or whatever, you can join our Discord, which is also free. Hit the link at the bottom of this video and you can join a really fun, helpful, and engaging community. And everybody there wants to win, but they also want to help you win, including myself. So I'm going to try to do that right now by going position by position for NFL Championship Week. So at quarterback, Josh Allen comes in with the best fantasy projection of the slate and 27% ownership. But once again, Patrick Mahomes is coming in as uber chalk because he's only 6K. I got news for you. Mahomes wasn't very good in his first playoff game of the year, only 12 fantasy points. I predicted that. So he was major chalk. So while I was a little bit underweight on Gibbs, and that was not great, I did get away from Mahomes, who was not going to get you there. And I was all over Jaden Daniels, who had 25 fantasy points, 22 in each of his first two playoff games. So I'm not going to eat the Mahomes chalk. Mahomes, obviously, when he gets to conference title games, he wins, and then he goes to the Super Bowl. But the Chiefs offense just is not that scary at this point, and the Bills defense is certainly capable of giving them a tough time. And just if everybody's going to be on Mahomes, I'm going to go chase a higher upside guy. I think pivoting to Jalen Hurts feels more appealing. He's the lowest owned guy on the slate, which is a little silly. I know he hasn't been amazing in the playoffs, but Hurts himself can get there just because of his rushing ability, his ability to get touchdowns. And then he does have explosive weapons that he can dump the ball off to A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Saquon Barkley, anyone. So Hurts is really a really good pivot away from Mahomes. But the guy I really want to get to here is Josh Allen. I'm going to buy into Narrative Street. I think it is time for the Bills to get there and get the job done. I think we're going to get a Bills-Eagles Super Bowl. I think the Chiefs' bid to three-peat is going to fall short here, unless the NFL has anything to say about it, right? So no doubt about it. Chiefs playoff games and Chiefs games in general seem, I don't really believe in rigged, but they seem rigged sometimes because the penalties the Chiefs get, it's ridiculous. That's the other thing, by the way. So Mahomes' chalk is another reason to get off of Mahomes, because if you watch their games, sorry if you're a Chiefs fan, but this is real. This is reality. They move the ball a lot of the times because of a penalty. So if you're getting, 15, 10, whatever yards or pass interference down the field, whether it's valid or not, if the Chiefs continue benefiting from things like that, as they often do, you're getting yards and production taken off the table that obviously they might not get otherwise if they're not getting helped by the refs. But then it's just, in general, it's just not there. So I think the ceiling on the Chiefs is a little bit lower than you'd like. So I'm just going to go away from the chalk there. Mahomes is a good value at 6K. He's the cheapest quarterback on the slate, second best projection. I'm just not really feeling it personally. The Bills are honestly a little bit more of a matchup that you would attack on the ground. And the Chiefs running game isn't very sexy. So it's just across the board, I don't really like KC here. I certainly agree that the Chiefs are a threat to win and get into the Super Bowl again, as they try to be the first team ever to win 3 straight Super Bowls. But I'm going against Kansas City overall on this slate. So Josh Allen's my favorite at 7.5K. I think this might be the time to hop off the Jane Daniels bandwagon. I've been on him basically all year, and I've been on him all playoffs, but this might not be the best spot. It's in Philly. He's got to deal with the elements. He did put up 36 fantasy points against them with 5 touchdowns through the air just a few weeks ago, back in week 16. Obviously, he has the nice, rushing floor built in. He's been very, very good. So, like, the ownership's low enough that I'm certainly going to get a sprinkling of Jaden Daniels at 19% ownership with the third best projection here, and 7K. His price has even come down. So I do like Jaden Daniels, but right now I think Josh Allen's going to be my number one quarterback play. Best projection, only $500 more than Daniels. Not the chalkiest option on the slate. So I think all of that's pretty appealing. And I think Jalen Hurts is a really appealing pivot away from Mahomes because I think the Eagles are going to win, and they are favored. And, this is a matchup that I do think he can have success in. Let's see how he did last time, just for a frame. Well, last time he got hurt. So he had 4 attempts in that game, ended up being a 36-33 shootout. This isn't really a Jalen Hurts game, but I do think he can have success on the ground and maybe potentially vulture some touchdowns. That said, I'm mostly Josh Allen at quarterback on this slate, and I just don't want to eat the Mahomes chalk no matter what you end up doing. At running back, it is Saquon Barkley's season, my friends. I still like Jalen Hurts just because he can get there, but this is going to be the Saquon Barkley show. It certainly has been so far in the playoffs. He had 42 fantasy points last week against the Rams with 205 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. And the previous week against the Packers, he wasn't even he didn't score a touchdown. And he should have had a touchdown in the last play of the game, but he just dropped on the ground for no reason. And he still had 17 fantasy points. He's been crushing 21 and 30 fantasy points in the 2 games before that. So there's nothing to fear about Saquon except for the ownership at 89%. You certainly can entertain going away from Saquon, whether that be stacking the Eagles passing attack or whether you just think the Commanders are going to come out and dominate. I don't think so. I think if the Commanders do win, it's going to be in a shootout. I don't think they're going to completely stifle Barkley and or Philly's offense in general. But look at the projection here. Saquon Barkley is doubling up the next best guy in James Cook. So this is just good chalk for me. Saquon looks like a monster. And also just in general, the Commanders have been bad against fantasy running backs. Let me pull it up as we're doing here. I should have already had it up here. It's just for my sake. You can't see this part of my screen. But just so you get the actual numbers of where it's at on the year, actually lately. So, yeah, Commanders have been bottom 10 against running backs over the last several weeks. And on the year, they have been at best middle of the pack. But lately, it's gotten worse. So, love Saquon. I'm going to eat that chalk. That is certainly the chalk I will have no problem stuffing into my lineups. And I'm pretty good on just being 100% on Saquon. I just don't see the upside in going away from him. So, second best option at 6.9K is James Cook. The Chiefs are not a very fun matchup at all. Lately, around the year, they're number 1 against fantasy running backs, so that's not great. But you know what? James Cook is pretty darn involved in what the Bills do on offense. He does have a ceiling, 21 here, 30, 28. He also has a floor. If he's not getting in the end zone, he can do a whole lot of nothing sometimes. But hey, he's not breaking the bank at 6.9K. He does have the second best projection on the slate. And if you are like me and think the Bills are going to get this one, I would not be that shocked if he ended up being, active as a receiver or ended up punching in a touchdown or 2 here. So I do like James Cook. If you have the funds of pairing him with Saquon, I think that is a pretty good way to go. That said, there are other value options on this slate, and I probably, for the most part, am going to go and, hunt out those values and kind of rotate them in with Barkley. Saquon is a building block. You don't have to go play James Cook. He looks fine, but if he's going to be 30% owned or more, I do not mind going away from him. So last week, I really did not think Brian Robinson Jr. was going to do anything, and he went off for 19 fantasy points against the Lions. They have a really good run defense, so that was a little bit surprising. The Eagles also have a pretty good run defense, number 2 in the league on the year against fantasy running backs. But if you think the Commanders are going to be in it, he's probably going to be relatively low owned. The ownership is getting split between James Cook and all these value guys. But if he's going to push for almost chalk as the second RB here, I don't mind going away from him. Once again, I just think going into last week, I thought the Commanders could keep it close. I just didn't really believe in their running backs. If I was going to play a running back, it was going to be Eckler. And sure enough, Eckler was fine, 12.8 fantasy points. He just, paled by in comparison to Brian Robinson Jr. I think once again, I'm going Eckler over Brian Robinson Jr. here. Similar projection, similar price, and a little bit less ownership. So I think he's interesting. We saw Kareem Hunt punch in a touchdown last week. And at 11 fantasy points, he needs to score a touchdown to hit. I think he's in play at 5.4K, especially since the Bills can be run on. There's, I'd say, Pacheco as well. He has been dreadful, but if he's going to get work and the matchup is there, I think Pacheco is in play at 5.2. Ray Davis stole a touchdown last week. This isn't Ray Davis, that's Ty Johnson. But I wanted to mention Ty Johnson too because it's only 4.4K. He does have a ceiling if he can get involved as a receiver, and that is always a possibility. There's also Ray Davis who got a touchdown, and he would absolutely need a touchdown to pay off. But 4.4, 4.3, those guys are probably the best punt values at the position. But for the most part, I'm looking at Eckler, Hunt, and Pacheco at that second RB slot. But like I said, if you have the funds and you want to just play it safe, Cook is a pretty good option there. It's just he's a lot more expensive than those guys, and he is not necessarily guaranteed to get there. So the cool thing is, you don't have to save cash on running back or quarterback because wide receiver, while it has some good options, nobody is really breaking the bank here. Terry McLaurin is a pretty good option on paper at 6.7K. He certainly benefited from this matchup the last time he faced the Eagles. He had 17 fantasy points, but really Philly has been pretty good against the pass. It's not a spot I'm really excited about. Obviously, the Rams didn't have a ton of success against them last week, and the Packers certainly didn't the week before. So Eagles have stepped it up defensively at home with a trip to the Super Bowl on the line. I just think they're probably going to contain Terry. At 6.7K, he is in play. I think I'd rather just pivot to A.J. Brown at a little bit less ownership. We know A.J. Brown has a massive ceiling. We know he hasn't been very involved lately. In the NFC title game with the season on the line, I would not be shocked if we had a fairly decent A.J. Brown game here. So if I have to pick only one guy to pay in that range, it's really just between those two. There are no other options. I think I'm going to go slightly more contrarian and go with A.J. Brown, but they both look fine, just not amazing. Xavier Worthy continues to be involved as a gadget guy. Can be, can get loose deep down the field. Only 8.7 fantasy points last week, but we know he has a ceiling and he has been involved. So he looks fine at 5.5K. If he's going to be really chalky, we can certainly consider getting away from that. Same with Khalil Shakir. He was uber chalk last week. Who's just okay with 12 fantasy points. You just never know which Chiefs or Bills guys are going to hit because there's no one dude that stands out. For the Chiefs, the one dude would be Kelsey, and he's not a wide receiver. And for the Bills, Josh Allen is their offense, and then maybe James Cook to a lesser degree. They just I guess Shakir looks pretty safe at 5.7. But the ceiling is not massive. The matchup is not great. And he's really owned. So while Shakir's a fine play and the price is palatable at 5.7, I have no issue with going underweight on Shakir and going to look at other ways that we can attack the Bills passing game. Because I do want Josh Allen. But my guess is Josh Allen will be okay through the air, and he'll probably do a lot of the damage on the ground. So if you want to play Shakir or Worthy, don't have a problem with it. They look like totally fine plays. I think Devontae Smith at basically the same price, slightly less ownership or slightly less projection, way less ownership. He looks a lot more interesting to me. Also pretty interested in Hollywood Brown, 4.2K. Got goose egged last week, nothing, no catches. So people are going to be a little bit scared to play him. Coming in at 33% ownership though, so maybe I'm not, right about that. But I like him. I think he's fine. Pretty unlikely he has a goose egg 2 weeks in a row. He is a downfield threat, pretty explosive guy still. So I do not mind him whatsoever. If Nuke is going to be super unowned at 4.7K, I don't mind it. He was not involved last week, but he also wasn't really needed. It's just really tough to trust the Chiefs wide receivers. I just think considering everybody is kind of in the same range, as far as value, price and projection and ownership, I just don't think there's anything wrong with taking a chance there. Same goes for Keon Coleman and Amari Cooper. They were not very involved last week, but they also were not needed. I would not be shocked at all if one of those guys popped off and had a way better game than Khalil Shakir. So I definitely want to get to Keon Coleman and Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper at 11% ownership in an AFC title game with a chance to go to his first ever Super Bowl. That's pretty appealing to me. I think that's interesting for sure. Commanders do spread the ball around, so if we think Terry's going to get shut down a little bit, we can go to Olamide Zacchaeus. He got injured last game, so he had a dud, but he was pretty involved a few weeks ago. Would not be shocked at all if he flies way under the radar, ends up having a decent game. You could also go up here 4.4K to Diami Brown. That's where people are going to go. I don't mind coming down here going to Olamide. There's also Curtis Samuel, 3.5K. Really tough to know when he's going to get involved and everything. But again, if everybody's going to go to Shakir, I do not mind going overweight on Amari, Keon, and even Curtis Samuel. Gosh, there's even Matt Collins. I don't know about Matt Collins or Jahan Dotson. These guys are just like, Justin Watson, Juju. These guys are all just shots in the dark once you get way down here. But you could really argue that's the case too with Hollywood and Keon and Amari. So I wouldn't rule them out. I wouldn't take Mac or Dotson or Crowder if he's healthy, or Juju or Watson out of my player pool. I just wouldn't be like crazy overweight on them. It'd just be a light sprinkling of those guys. The reality is wide receiver doesn't look very alluring on this slate. If you want to play it safe, Terry, AJ, maybe Shakir, that's probably the way to go if you have the money to do that. But just nobody is a must is the big thing to consider here. So Travis Kelce at 6K, his price has come up after getting 27 fantasy points last week, rightfully so. He has a matchup with the Bills here, who I think they're just kind of like, middle of the pack against tight ends. Let's see how he did against them earlier this year. Probably not great because they did not win that game. Excuse me. Let me check real quick. Back and see. Where is that game? Cannot find the game. 2.8 fantasy points. Not great. Not great, Travis. Okay, but Kelce obviously is back in it a little bit. He's been a lot better lately. 22 and 27 fantasy points in his last 2 games. Pretty involved. And it's like Mahomes is not going to shy away from Kelce with a chance to go to a 3rd straight Super Bowl, right? So 6K is honestly not enough. It's not a good matchup. He is very chalky, but he's by far the best projecting tight end of the slate. I will be at or over where the field is on Kelce because all the other guys are like totally lightning in the bottle type plays. Dallas Goedert is fine. I think he was injured the last time the Eagles and Commanders faced off. No, he played 11 fantasy points in that game. He only played them 1 time this year, so that's decent. That's nothing to be sad about. Commanders, not the best matchup against tight ends, but at his price point, 3.9K, I don't have or 4.5K. He's 3.9K last week. Sorry, 4.5K. I think it's okay, but I think I'd probably just go up and get Kelce at that point. Zach Ertz is kind of similar situation. 4.3 is fine. He did score last week. He's a little bit banged up. But he had 13 fantasy points last week. That's 13 plus in 3 of his last 4. Last time he played Philly, he had 2.2 fantasy points. But hey, you know what? There is the revenge narrative of him trying to ice out his former squad as he tries to get to the Super Bowl with the Commanders. So he's in play, just not super owned here. Dalton Kincaid's carrying the 3rd most ownership, which is a little bit interesting. I know he's super tough to trust. He was a bust in season-long fantasy football. My bad. But I mean, he's a good player. Like I thought he'd be a lot more involved, but the Bills decided to just be a really balanced and unpredictable offense. It's worked out for them as a team in real life. Just hasn't really worked out for fantasy purposes when it comes to Kincaid. But he's 3.6K. He gets a Chiefs defense that is bottom 5 against fantasy tight ends. So I love Kincaid here. If I'm not paying up for Kelce, I think Kincaid's a really good pay down at 3.6K. You could use that same logic and punt even further with Dawson Knox. I actually like the idea of pairing these guys right now. And Kincaid's not super owned. So I think that's a nice little slightly contrarian play on a 2-game slate. As far, Noah Gray, he sometimes gets involved with the Chiefs. You just never know. Like they could certainly, Buffalo could go either way to isolate and shut down Kelce. And then we could see more out of, Noah Gray possibly. Not a safe play, but at 3K, I think salary saver, he's certainly an option we can consider. But for the most part, I'm paying up for Kelce, and I think Kincaid is my favorite 2nd option at tight end. Defense is a crapshoot. I think the first team I'm looking at is going to be the Eagles. The Eagles defense has looked very, very good through 2 weeks. I know the Commanders are extremely dynamic. The Eagles had a tough time against them this year. But I just think the playoffs are a different beast. The Eagles project the best. They do project for the most ownership, but they're only $200 more than the Chiefs. And, no, I don't think any rookie quarterback has ever played in the Super Bowl. Certainly has never won one. So Jay Daniels would certainly be trying to buck history here. I just think this is where the magic might run out. It'll be a learning experience for Daniels, and the Commanders will be good for the next decade. But just it's not going to happen this week. I don't think. I'm just gonna, you just got to take stands. It's a 2-game slate. You got to take some stands. And my stand is the Eagles defense is probably going to show out. Saquon Barkley is going to run all over the Commanders, and Jaden Daniels is probably just going to run out of gas in a pretty tough spot. I like the Bills too. So the Bills are the second cheapest defense on the slate. The Commanders are okay in a game that could be lower scoring than expected, but I'm not really feeling them. Bills are unowned, and nobody's really taking the Bills to beat the Chiefs on the road. But the Bills definitely could win this game. It's got a 1-point spread. They beat them earlier in the regular season. This is like the classic get the monkey off the back thing. The Chiefs are constantly in the way of Josh Allen and the Bills. So I can see the Bills really stepping it up here if the refs get out of the way. So 2.9K there, my second favorite defense. If you think it's the script's gonna get flipped, it's gonna go the other way. KC at 3.1 obviously stands out. They are a well-coached defense, and they are at home, and they are favored to win. All right, that is gonna do it for me. I mean, in Saquon we trust. Fade the chalk with Mahomes, and then try to get a little bit different with our secondary wide receiver options for the most part. I don't mind eating chalk on a 2-game slate as long as I feel comfortable with it. Like Kelsey, good. Saquon, good. Mahomes, nah. I'm going to go up a high and get Josh Allen, or drop down low and get Jalen Hurts. That is going to do it for me. If this helps you in any way, hit that like button, get those likes all the way up, and also subscribe to the channel. If you watch these videos and you like them, and they help you, please throw it back a little bit if you can, and give us that subscribe. And also, if you ever win big from any advice we give you, you can come back and hit that super thanks underneath any of our videos and hand a little back to us. Also, join our Discord. A lot of conversation going in there. You can share your lineups, get extra advice, and also get access to our core plays going into lock every week and every day slate. We also do NBA DFS. You'll be able to catch that video at the end of this one when it goes live later today. All right. Thanks for tuning in, and good luck this week.